Look at these passports. They're different colours and they have different symbols on the front page. But the differences between them are far fewer than the similarities. They all do the same job after all. But before looking at modern passports, let's go and look at their history. When did countries start using them and what makes them so different from other documents? If you enjoy this video, I'd appreciate it if you could click the like button and subscribe if you haven't done so already. And why not share this video with, well, anyone you like. The earliest precursors to passports can be traced back to ancient civilizations. For instance, in ancient Egypt, there were documents called letters of safe conduct that allowed individuals to travel safely through foreign territories. Similarly, during the Roman Empire, officials used documents known as diplomata to provide safe passage for diplomats and messengers. In the ancient world, travel was more difficult, more expensive, and more dangerous. Consequently, much rarer. Very few people travelled, at least officially. Borders were more porous, and the status of border regions was often less clear. The authority of governments far, far away was often very lightly felt at the borders. Also, the concept of national identity was alien to most people. There are still a lot of borders like this nowadays. Large empires often had tokens which acted like external and internal passports for travel within their territory. In medieval Europe, serfdom resulted in most of the population being bound to the land they worked. The purpose of many city walls in medieval Europe was not just for defence, but also to make sure that anyone entering or leaving the city passed through the gates and paid taxes if they were visiting in order to trade. During the Middle Ages and the Renaissance, the concept of safe conduct continued, with various rulers and authorities issuing documents to ensure the safe passage of favoured individuals within their domains. And there was also reciprocal recognition of these documents between certain states, as we might call them. These documents often bore the seal of the issuing authority and contained descriptions of the bearer. In the late 13th century, Marco Polo, a Venetian merchant, travelled extensively in Asia and reached China. He was not the first European to do this by any means, but he was the first to leave such a detailed account of his travels. There were no passports as we know them today, but he had first Venetian travel documents, and after meeting the Kublai Khan, the grandson of Genghis Khan and Emperor of China, he was provided with a piazza, a gold tablet that authorised him to make use of a vast network of imperial horses and lodgings. Thanks to this kind of official passport, Polo travelled through Asia not merely as a wandering merchant, but as an honoured guest of the great Khan himself. In 1414, the Safe Conduct Act was passed in England during the reign of Henry V. This law provided passports and made it high treason to offer any harm to the bearers of these documents. They were not only issued to people from the kingdom, but anybody who had the favour of the government. In the 15th and 16th centuries, as international trade and diplomacy increased, European states began to develop more formalised systems for regulating travel. Documents known as passports started to emerge, issued by monarchs and governments to their subjects travelling abroad. These early passports were often handwritten and contained basic identifying information about the bearer. The term passport is believed to come from the French, from the verb passer, meaning to pass, and port, meaning seaport. It was quickly adopted in England in the 15th century, at a time when French, or London French, was the language of public administration, and of course, to travel abroad from England, you need to pass through seaports. During the 18th and 19th century, the Industrial Revolution and the rise of nationalism led to further developments in passport systems. Passports became more standardised and began to include features such as photographs. And before photography, there was written descriptions of the bearer's physical characteristics. Even after the adoption of photographs, passports used to have descriptions of any distinguishing features such as scars and so on. They also started to be used more extensively for border control and immigration purposes. In the 20th century, there was a significant advance in passport technology and regulation. The First World War ended what had been often described as the first era of globalization, and there were stricter passport controls. Standardized passport requirements for international travel were introduced in many countries, and the League of Nations also had a role in standardizing passport formats and procedures. After World War II, the United Nations and other international organisations worked to further standardise passport regulations and make international travel much easier. Even family passports were introduced. Family passports were issued to one member of the family, but may have been used by all family members for travelling purposes. However, the official passport bearer must be travelling as well. I mean, family passports are quite rare these days. So coming back to today's passports, what are the characteristics of a modern passport that makes them so different from other documents? After the First World War, the League of Nations wanted to make blue the standard colour of passport covers. In fact, the British passport was blue for most of its history. Then, with the introduction of the European Union passport, it became burgundy. Since Brexit, it has returned more or less to its original colour. As you can see, there is no standard colour for passports today, although, as they are used in an international context, a lot of things are standard. Like with many other documents and banknotes throughout history, there has been a constant war between governments that produce these documents and the forgers. Modern passports use holograms precisely for this reason. Most passports use various types of ink, some of which are heat sensitive and change colour in different temperatures. Others change colour when put under UV lights. There are also optically variable inks which change colour according to the angle from which you view them. Some characters might use an extremely small font, which is effectively invisible to the naked eye. There is another factor. Passports are pretty sturdy documents. They have to be, and they don't fall apart easily. The pages are in fact sewn together in the old style, which not only makes them very hard to break, but it also makes them very hard to tamper with. You're probably aware of this little logo on the front of most modern passports, which indicate that they have radio frequency identification, a chip which in turn can contain all sorts of information about the bearer, age, sex, marital status, and so on. It is also possible to link the data on the passport RFID chips to other databases. The introduction of machine-readable passports with biometric features such as RFID chips and facial recognition technology has further enhanced passport security and efficiency in recent decades. Most important of all, I think, is the combination of all of these factors together that make it very difficult and very, very expensive to forge a passport. It's probably easier and cheaper to steal someone else's identity and get a passport through the conventional channels. Of course, I've never tried to do this, so I can't really confirm that that is true. Bye for now.